On the morning of July 1943, church bells rang in small villages across Volhynia, calling the faithful to Sunday Mass. By nightfall, those same churches would be filled not with hymns, but with smoke, screams, and silence. This day would be remembered as Bloody Sunday, a chapter of World War II that remains largely unknown outside Eastern Europe. But to understand why neighbor turned on neighbor, why entire villages vanished from the map, we have to go back before the war, before the Nazis, before the Soviets, to the fragile and fractured world of interwar Eastern Europe. Between World War I and World War II, the regions of Volhynia and Eastern Galicia were part of the Second Polish Republic. These were borderlands, a mosaic of ethnic Poles, Ukrainians, Jews, and other minorities. Relations were tense. Many Ukrainians resented Polish rule, viewing it as a continuation of centuries of foreign domination, first by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, later by the Russian Empire and Austria-Hungary. Polish authorities, meanwhile, feared Ukrainian separatism and pursued assimilation policies, promoting the Polish language, settling Polish war veterans on Ukrainian majority lands, and limiting Ukrainian political activity. For Ukrainian nationalists, this was cultural suffocation. For Poles, it was a defense of a fragile, newly reborn state. Into this simmering resentment emerged the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, or OUN. Formed in 1929, the OUN believed that only a completely independent Ukraine could guarantee the survival of the Ukrainian nation. They also believed that independence could not be achieved peacefully. They embraced political violence and ethnic homogeneity as core strategies. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland from the west. Just over 2 weeks later, on September 17, the Soviet Union invaded from the east, fulfilling the secret terms of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Poland collapsed within weeks. Volhynia and Eastern Galicia fell under Soviet control. The Soviets wasted no time dismantling Polish institutions, arresting officials, deporting thousands to Siberia, executing those deemed enemies of the people. Ukrainian culture was also repressed, as Moscow feared any nationalist sentiment. Then, in June 1941, Hitler turned on his Soviet ally. Operation Barbarossa brought German forces deep into Soviet territory. The Red Army retreated in chaos, and the Nazis rolled into Volhynia. For the OUN, this looked like the moment they had been waiting for. If the Soviets were gone, and the Germans distracted, perhaps they could carve out an independent Ukraine. Under German occupation, the OUN split into factions. The more radical wing, led by Stepan Bandera, pursued an uncompromising vision, a Ukraine free of all foreign elements, Poles, Jews, Russians. In 1942, the armed wing of Ukrainian nationalism emerged, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, or UPA officially. They claimed to fight for Ukrainian independence against both the Nazis and the Soviets. But in practice, they also targeted ethnic minorities, especially the Polish population of Volhynia and Eastern Galicia. The UPA's leadership saw the war as an opportunity to solve what they called the Polish question once and for all. The logic was brutal. If the Poles were gone, killed, or driven out post-war, Ukraine could keep the territory without dispute. In early 1943, the UPA began coordinated attacks on Polish villages. The goal: ethnic cleansing. The methods: terror, brutality, and the destruction of entire communities. They struck at dawn, surrounding villages, cutting off escape routes. Homes and churches were set ablaze. Families who fled were cut down with axes, scythes, and pitchfork stalls of the farm, turned into tools of mass murder. On August 30, 1943, in the village of Ostrovki, about 438 Poles were killed in a single day, 246 of them children. Survivors recalled the attackers using deception, pretending to offer safety, even kindness, before turning on their victims without warning. In Wola Ostrowiecka, UPA fighters gathered villagers into a schoolhouse under the pretense of protection. Groups were led out to a barn and executed with hammers and iron bars. Women and children were locked inside the school, which was then set on fire. July 11, 1943, a Volhynian Bloody Sunday. UPA death squads, aided by local peasants, attacked at least 99 Polish settlements in a single coordinated operation. They chose Sunday knowing that many Poles would be gathered in churches. In the village of Kisilin, attackers locked worshippers inside a church, then opened fire. Survivors were finished off with knives and axes. Across Volhynia that day, thousands were killed: priests, farmers, entire families. These killings were not random, they were the execution of a written directive by UPA Commander Dmytro Klyakivsky, who called for the liquidation of the entire Polish population in the province. Polish self-defense centers formed where possible, the most famous in Massacres, which sheltered 20,000 people. Behind makeshift fortifications, they held out against repeated UPA assaults. Weapons were scarce. Nazi occupation made armed resistance a crime punishable by death, but workshops in Massacres repaired captured arms and made their own. Still, most communities could not defend themselves. By 1945, an estimated 100,000 Poles had been murdered and 300,000 displaced. Some UPA leaders met violent ends. Roman Shukevich, UPA's commander, died in 1950 during a Soviet raid. Klyakivsky was killed in 1945, but others, like Mikola Lebed, escaped justice entirely, shielded by Western intelligence agencies during the Cold War. For survivors, this was a bitter reality. Most perpetrators were never punished, and some were even celebrated in certain nationalist circles. Today, the Volhynia massacres remain a wound in Polish-Ukrainian relations. Memorials stand in both countries, some solemn, others contested. In the villages that no longer exist, only foundations and wells remain, silent witnesses to a time when human bonds broke under the weight of ideology and war. The story of Volhynia is a reminder of how quickly political ambition and ethnic hatred can consume ordinary people, and how the victims of such violence are often forgotten when history moves on. History remembers the battles, the treaties, the generals, but the true cost of war are written in the names of villages that no longer appear on any map, and in the unmarked graves that lie beneath quiet fields, where the only sound is the wind. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into Volhynia 1943, the forgotten genocide between Poland and Ukraine, don't forget to subscribe to Gilb's Chronoscope for more incredible, shocking, and often downright unbelievable stories from history. Stay safe.